Good evening, Poonam ma'am.
Good evening, Sagar. Good evening, Ashima.
Hello, hello.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Harish.
Hello, everyone.
It's a little blurred, right? But I think we'll have to manage with it since I'm not at home.
I
The
think it's
voice is
okay.
clear?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, I think it's okay. Perfectly fine.
Okay.
Good, good.
Can you believe I still can't figure out how to blur this? Never ever.
I'll tell you. I could do it before when I was waiting for you, I figured it out.
There's a little
Yeah,
up
go to video.
arrow next to
Ashima,
your
go to video.
video button. Click
Yeah.
on it. You'll see a blur my background button.
Go on video.
Uske
Blur
saath
my
there's a
background.
small arrow. Yeah, there you go.
So easy, Sagar. You make things so easy.
I think we're waiting for one more person, right?
Yes, we are. Somebody wants to, there's a dot. Should I give him permission
No,
in the
no, we don't
video?
know if that's a speaker or hold on, I'll just message him.
Yeah. So we're waiting for Dr. Pramit.
Yeah.
Actually, can you message him on WhatsApp that if he's joined, it only shows him as a dot. He can rename himself. And if he says it's him, we can let him in.
I just dropped him a message. Let's see. So, Sagar, my screen is not shared, right? I can still continue doing whatever I am on my laptop.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sagar, it is not him. He's yet to join. He's joining in another 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
Do you get dots frequently joining sessions?
Not really. This is my first. That's why I was like wondering who doesn't want to give away his name? Like an anonymous person listening the conversation.
Wants to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah. The first thing that came in my mind is, do I have to worry about what I'm saying?
We haven't met before, Harish, no?
No, we haven't had the pleasure. No, not really. But you're at Sriram. I do know Anjali ma'am and Nidhi. I think they are at the Sriram school.
Which Nidhi?
Oh,
Which
may,
Anjali?
I-
Anjali Sharma, who's that Anjali who's with the Sri Ram school?
Anjali Uppal, I think.
Uppal, no. So you're talking of Anjali Uppal and Nidhi Mehra.
Yeah.
So they are with the Millennium Universal Schools. That's another arm of the Sri Ram family,
Oh, okay.
but they are not from the Malsri or Ravli campuses.
I see.
Good evening, Dr. Pramit.
Good evening.
So, Harish, I think you missed because if you would have been part of the International ACAC Regional Conference, it was held in Sri Ram School.
It was, yes.
Yes, and she was the
Sorry,
person behind it.
sorry. We must have met.
No,
Yeah.
actually, I used to be on the Governance and Nominations Committee at IACAC last year. I chose
Okay.
not to continue this year, but I wanted to attend the Regional Institute at Sriram. But I was there at IC3. It was just too many days away from family. I had to go back.
Yes. Oh, I thought
How
you
was
came
your
and I didn't
experience?
remember.
How was your experience with the governance board? Because I mean, I did get the opportunity, but then I have too much on my plate with the school stuff. So I was like, not this year. I don't think I
I
can
was a
handle
part
it.
of it, Ashima, this year, but I kind of requested to be out because I felt I wasn't doing justice with so much to do in school.
Exactly. That's the battle that we, fight every day. We want to do something outside as well, but then how should we really manage our own work in school? It's like it's increasing
Yeah.
day by day, isn't it, Poonam ma'am? We need more
It really warms
counselors
my
in.
heart to hear that
Yeah.
other people have it. I thought I almost felt inefficient always.
Trust me. Trust me, the feeling is so mutual, and you're not the only person. I've spoken to 10 different people who feel the same way.
Yeah, and then you feel so guilty that you don't do anything outside of your bloody paid job, man.
But do you have time? We've
Are
been
we on
called as a
record?
backbone in schools, but then we end up working like
Are we
corporates
recording?
till 5 o'clock.
Did I
Yeah.
get recorded with foul language? Then we'll have to stop the recording, Sagar, and play it again. Record it again, please.
It'll be edited, don't worry.
Okay.
Sagar is our guy.
Okay.
Only I have access to it, so don't worry.
And please, Sagar, make sure you edit it before it goes up anywhere. If it goes
Absolutely,
up.
ma'am. Trust me, even I don't have access to it. Sagar does.
No. Then he should forget it or something.
Sorry,
Don't
you are
worry.
on mute, Dr. Pramit.
Poonam ma'am, see what you're using bad words for, right? I want to do more. इसको highlight होना चाहिए.
Nightmare.
It's
The next-
it's 7:03. Would you guys like to start? Shall I let everyone else in?
It's just 6 in the waiting. Should we wait for another 2 minutes and then or no?
I think इनको आने देते
कर
हैं.
देते हैं?
Then
चलो,
हाँ,
ठीक
so
है.
you can maybe alongside put a message on the group, and then I think you should start. We don't want to lose these also.
Okay, perfect. Go for it. Awesome. I can see a lot of people over here. Puneet ji, thank you so much for joining. Saurabh, thank you. Mridhu, welcome. Deepika, Deepa.
Good evening, everybody.
So not many people know, but Puneet sir is already working towards this issue and creating awareness. At least in Bangalore, that's what I know.
Oh.
And it's wonderful to have him over here.
Lovely, Puneet. I feel like in a classroom where I feel like asking people to switch on their camera. It's still a small group,
Remember, there was a time when we used to do this during COVID.
tell you. And kids wouldn't.
And kids wouldn't, exactly. But they had their own reasons, I believe, you know.
Yeah. They really had their reasons.
Yes, so true. So I think we should start because we do have some audience and others would be joining in. All right. Sagar, can I start then?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. I am Ashima Sethi, Coordinator, University and Guidance Counseling, working with Legacy School in Bangalore. I'm excited to welcome you and our panel discussion on mental health. Just to set the context right as to why we are doing this, mental health is a vital aspect of our overall well-being, impacting our thoughts, feelings, actions. Today, we'll be discussing the challenges our youth faces and the stigma that often surrounds mental health issues in our community. Also learn what we can do better to support our youth. The whole purpose of this session is to raise awareness and inspire action towards better mental health. We have a fantastic group of panelists here to share their insights. For the audience who have participated and joined us on time, we'll have time for audience questions, so feel free to participate in them towards the end of the panel discussion. Let's briefly introduce our esteemed panelists. We have with us Harish Menon. Harish brings over 20 years of diverse experience spanning education and health sectors with a background in nonprofits, startup, and management consulting. A former leader of strategic initiatives, operations, finance, and partnerships for the College Board, he impacted over 7 million students across 195 countries annually. Harish serves as a consultant and board member for several experiential learning edtech companies and is the founding chair of the IC3 Institute's Student Mental Health Task Force. We have with us Poonam Prakash, who I call Poonam Ma'am. She's the Career Counseling Center Coordinator working with the Shri Ram School, Malsari and Aravali in Gurgaon. She is one of the educators in the industry who I admire the most for her work that she is doing and the experience that she brings in. With over 3 decades of experience in education, she has worked in diverse fields and with students from diverse backgrounds. Last but not the least, we have Dr. Pramit Rastogi, child and adolescent psychiatrist and medical director, sorry about that, working with STEPS Center for Mental Health. Dr. Rastogi is a Johns Hopkins trained child and adolescent psychiatrist with 15 years of clinical experience. He runs a clinic in Gurgaon and Delhi focusing on child, adolescents, and young adults and their parents. In addition, he writes on topics of interest for print media and conducts teacher and parent training workshops for schools and organizations, something we all need in schools these days. So, just to kick off our discussion on unseen battles, recognizing early signs, and navigating mental health in youth, could each one of you share your definition of mental health in just a few words? Over to you, Poonam ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashima, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of the panel. I'm really excited about it. For me, I would put mental health in two buckets. One is the state of just being happy, being at peace with yourself. That is good mental health. And the other aspect of mental health to me would be for a child who comes from a neurodiverse background or a child with physical disability who hence comes in the mental well-being and someone who needs to be taken care of from that standpoint. So these are two clear distinct buckets that I would put them into.
Wonderful. How about you, Dr. Pramit?
Sorry. All right. So according to me, mental health would be sort of the awareness of and the awareness of the consequences of a sum total of like behavioral, psychological, and social patterns that we have. So if you are aware of and understand the consequences of the patterns, right? And also the understanding that we have varying degrees of control over it, right? So that means that everybody is somewhere on the spectrum of anxiety, everybody is somewhere on the spectrum of ADHD, to be honest, right? Everybody is somewhere on the spectrum of learning disabilities. And there are certain parts that we can have some control over, and there are certain things that we can't. So then everybody is somewhere on the spectrum, and therefore everybody struggles at a certain point in time in their college, school, job situation. So yeah, that.
Wonderful. What about you, Harish?
First of all, thank you, TOC, for hosting this conversation. Such an important topic, especially on the eve of World Mental Health Day, which is tomorrow, October 10th. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. By the way, just a disclaimer, I'm probably the least experienced in mental health amongst our esteemed panelists over here. When I think of mental health, I'm now slowly beginning to subscribe to the thought of the thinking process of Simon Sinek. And when we all talk about mental health, we paint a picture of this ultimate state of happiness, this sort of end goal that we want to achieve. But think about your physical health. When you go to the gym, for example, there are some days where you're in the greatest of shape. You're lifting large weights. You're probably running the extra mile. You just feel fantastic that day. But there are some days where you're not feeling great for whatever reason. Perhaps dehydrated, didn't sleep well, probably didn't eat well that day. And what do you say? You just say you had a bad day and you move on. But you go back to the gym and you work on, by the way, we call it physical fitness. I'm trying to slowly change my my language around mental health and call it mental fitness. And I'm urging all of us to try and work towards our mental fitness. It's okay to be sad. In fact, it is very human of us to feel sad, to have a few days of darkness, as long as you work towards it. And of course, if you have darkness for several days, then that becomes an issue. And of course, I would recommend you go and seek expert help around it. But I like this sort of difference between mental health versus mental fitness.
It's actually very interesting, and this is something that prompts me to kind of think through. Everybody takes sick leaves. Do we really take mental fitness leave? Do we get that? Not often. Forget about often. Never, basically. We don't even talk about it per se. But yes, going forward, it's very interesting to know different dynamic viewpoints. What is the most significant challenge that you encounter in your roles when you're addressing this issue? Poonam ma'am, you as a counselor, Dr. Pramit, you as as a clinical psychiatrist, Harish, you as somebody who's advocating and running the task force. How do you really see this?
I'm going to answer the question. So I've had a 2-decade journey of being a hardcore teacher in the classroom, teaching senior classes. So I'm going to answer a part of the question from the perspective of a teacher. And I think as a teacher, I felt it was a lot more easier for me to identify that there was someone wrong. That child in the classroom who was defiant, who was angry, who was distracted, instead of perceiving and instead of looking at them that way, building that bond with them, making that connect, and then it becomes very easy to trace back the reason of their behavior. So I think as a teacher, it's really easy simply because of the constant connect. And for those of you who have not worked in schools, you may be aware that career counselors don't go into class for 1 hour every day, 5 days of the week. So the connect isn't as strong. So for a career counselor to be on top of things, it's not always possible for us to know that there is something amiss. We may not even in our sessions know that there is something amiss. For that, it's very necessary that we are constantly in touch with the academic team. We are constantly in touch with the emotional needs counselors. A child who's on SEND roles, the special roles, that's something that our system data throws up, so we are all aware. But the regular meetings is what really helps us. That's one way of knowing. Sometimes There are times when a child just walks into the office and sits across the table and just talks. Like, for instance, I remember there was a child. So since I head the career counseling cell, I don't really work at the ground level with children. But then there are times when offers have started coming and a child will say, "Ma'am, may I come in?" And they can just sit and talk to you for half an hour. And I know this child has not got what she wanted. And that is why the conversation, so you're able to identify, that you need to reach out and inform someone that there is something amiss. So those are the times when we feel that there is a challenge in both our roles. Yeah.
Exactly. Dr. Pramit, how about you? Sorry, you're again on mute.
So we are looking at early signs or what to identify. Is that the question? Yeah.
Yes, from your viewpoint, what are the significant challenges that you encounter in your role, I
So
believe the first would be somebody actually coming up to you. That's also in India.
Correct. But if I were to place myself in the school, right? So negate that, who comes to me. I think we have to keep an eye out for everything. So, for example, people who are visible, obviously, people who are just vanilla doing their thing, that you don't know who is masking how much, right? And I agree with Harish. We also have to think about fitness. So, if somebody is masking, that is a strength, right? That is resilience. But taking too far, sometimes you can mask through middle school, but start cracking in senior school, and you often see the handoffs between middle school and high school where they're a stellar student and suddenly they start struggling in high school. And the third thing is any kind of extremes of any kind. So if you say that sometimes parents say in middle school, teachers would say you don't have to come to PTMs, he's just too perfect. Now that's also a problem, right? And as ma'am said, anybody who's behaving erratically, right? One has to be curious. I often see that sometimes behavioral sort of deviance, right, of any kind, is immediately seen from a disciplinary lens. I always would like to see that from a curiosity lens. Discipline is always an option, but do we know where that distress, where that angst, where that externalization is coming from? So three things, right? Invisible, which means internally focused kids. I'm good for nothing. I am apathetic. The teacher is saying, can you do something? And they are not reacting. So internal focused kids, external focused kids, which means everything is bad, nothing is right. And anybody who's any kind of extreme good, extreme disruptive. So to me, I don't trust anybody doing well till I know they are, because you just don't know.
That's true. So would you say that even students who come across as perfectionists, like doing everything, apt, correct, um, could there be challenges over there as well that we kind of overlook? Any signs?
Okay. So, for example, if you've never needed to tell a child to do their homework, if their work is always complete, if they are on autopilot, right? Now they are a kid, right? So they should be acting like one, and your job should be to keep them on task. So that means there is an adult in the head, right? Before their age. So what are some things that will happen? They might not be able to connect with other kids because other kids are doing their thing, and they might be a target of bullying or targeting, right? They might also not be able to deal with the chaos that comes with higher grades. Sometimes you just can't complete your syllabus. So what are you going to do if you're that methodical, right? So this is an early sign for what I call the anxiety obsessive compulsive symptom profile. And I'll reference this later also, but I call this the Rahul Dravid Sachin Tendulkar phenomenon. Right? So to me, Rahul Dravid is a very obsessive, compulsive, organized, methodical, perfectionistic person. And to me, Sachin Tendulkar is a little bit on the anxious side, right? Can't sleep before matches, big matches, right? So that profile has its own shortfalls, right? And then the Rishabh Pant of the world and the Hardik Pandyas of the world, who are more of the ADHD kind of kids, right? Who are very confident, who are very optimistic, who kind of start fighting in the end. Over time, they kind of start feeling less confident, less optimistic because things are not adding up. So they struggle in that direction. And the perfectionistic struggle in that direction. Both of them start struggling more in high school because both approaches, over perfectionism and over hustling, both work in primary school and middle school, also depending on the IQ that they have. So, what kind of strengths do they have? Cognitive strengths, social strengths. If you have good friends, then somebody will remind you, "Arey yaar, wo homework hai, kar lena," right? But if you're socially isolated or academically just about average, then both the Dravids and the Rishabh Pants will start showing up early, and the people who have social and academic supports will show up a little late. So does that make sense?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think we can correlate with it because we work with students where they have so much academic pressure, parental pressure, societal pressure to do really well. And some of them just give up, I don't care. This is what it is. And at times, very
Also,
interesting.
no, I can take 1 second because I don't want to bring up this again. It takes time. So there is this Rahul Dravid and there is this Rishabh Pant, right? But there is also a Kohli and a KL Rahul. Okay, so Kohli is a little bit more Dravid. He can explode, but not that much. KL Rahul can really explode, but he's not like Rishabh Pant. So sometimes people are in the middle, right? They also struggle because they want to be like Kohli will want to be like Rahul Dravid, but sometimes will get off to a wrong start, right? So all four kids can struggle at the right or the wrong time. So I see everybody somewhere on the spectrum between a Pant and a Dravid, and everybody can struggle. So the point I'm making, and again, is there is no profile that is safe across the 12 years of school. And
Very interesting. There is.
think of themselves in this metaphor or analogy. And if you're not cricket fans, ask your spouse or your friends to break it down for you. Dravid, KL Rahul, Kohli, and Pant.
Interesting. Lovely. What about you, Harish?
Well, I am a cricket buff, Dr. Rastogi, and if it's all right with you, I am going to use your analogy in the future, if you don't mind. So we've heard perspectives from Poonam ma'am and Dr. Rastogi who work directly with students. I don't work directly with students. So perhaps I can give you a perspective from the role I play, which is first of all in a very early stages of its forming. So I'm quite honored to be chairing a task force within IC3. And we just started off last year. And the people I get to work with are the educators, the school leadership, in trying to figure out mental health strategies to implement in schools. Now, there's a very interesting study that was done not too long ago, perhaps 4 or 5 years ago. You can find it in the National Library of Medicine. And that was a cross-sectional study done amongst more than 500 teachers, secondary school teachers in South India. And they were asked a question around what did they feel about mental health? What was their perception about mental health? And the vast majority of them, I believe more than 70% of them, felt that mental health was not an illness, but a weakness. And in a conversation with someone else, that person kind of added his own commentary saying, it's even worse because sometimes these teachers consider it an excuse, that the students are forming an excuse. So that I think is even worse than considering it as a weakness. But I think things have changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 years in India. The stigma and the taboo around mental health, I think, has reduced significantly. But I think it's a little bit nuanced, and let me explain why. Not too long ago, people would not admit or whether they're having mental issues, struggling, they would not go seek help. And these are all hushed, whispered conversations, not too different from, when someone had cancer or HIV 10, 20 years ago, the same, not too many people talked about it, right? But now, as I speak with students, people are now realizing the relevance and importance and perhaps the effectiveness of counseling and therapy. And so I find that part now reducing, the stigma around the need to go to an expert to seek help. But where there is still stigma and taboo is while they respect the profession and that it is effective and that they would not consider anyone who goes and seeks help any less than themselves, they themselves may not seek the help for themselves. So it's getting a little bit nuanced, but I think it's improving. So that's a really good step that folks in India are moving forward. I find that in my conversations with schools, with the leaders of the boards of education, they're all very welcoming. They all understand the importance of mental health in schools, and they all want to do something about it. And in fact, tomorrow, I hope I'm allowed to share this announcement today. If not, perhaps the leaders of IC3 will pat my head. But we are going to announce a rather significant initiative that I'm really excited about. But IC3 is going to be partnering with CREW to bring their project learning initiative to schools across the country, aimed at school leaders and educators, and have them go through the whole project learning approach to come up with school mental strategies. So I think there's a lot of change happening in India. It's slow, but we will get there.
It is a lot of change happening in India. And I must say that, since the time that I was actually working in the UK and coming back to India, I've seen a lot of people now openly talking about this, not just as an issue, but as something that they truly want to work towards. Um, Brings me back to the question again, we all know, Dr. Pramit, that you have worked in India and US as well. So having worked in both India and the US, have you observed any differences in how parents in school in India respond to mental health diagnosis in their children? We'd love to know the difference in it.
So I think the caveat is there are many Americas in America and there are many Indias in India, right? So it's very hard to answer this question, but I think at least to the population that I cater to in India and the population I cater to in the US, I can compare those two accurately. In the US, I was working with people, middle class, upper middle class, but also, inner city. So there were lots of psychosocial situations presenting as mental health difficulties. So single family homes, broken homes, drugs, a lot of neglect, right? India, on the other hand, at least the population I see, is a lot more biological. So nutrition is intact, broad family systems are intact. Yes, there could be a family that in the US would have separated, but in India, they are carrying forward. Dysfunctional in its own way, but functional in its own way. So biology is more prominent in India. So you will see good quality, or I mean, in my language, like good quality OCD symptoms, good quality anxiety symptoms that respond well to classic therapy, classic medications, classic parent work. The US was more of a mishmash of, and the US, I was in an academic center, so I saw a fairly broad range because the US has three systems, right? Insurance only, right? Academic centers and private practice only. Private practice is $200 to $800 an hour, right? Insurance is a little bit, lower socioeconomic strata, and academic centers will cater to all. Now, it was very easy to put a diagnosis, start a medication. In India, parents want to know exactly what's going on, and that has led to my own clinical skills developing well to come up with this cricket analogy, because now everybody gets it. And the dad will pause the meeting and explain to the wife if she doesn't follow cricket. Okay, this is what Dr. Sogi is saying about this pump thing, right? So they are wanting to know. They're wanting to know what the solution is, and I'm able to get away with less medications because people are, if they understand what the problem is and they are a little bit medication averse in India as compared to the US, they are able to do the hard work. They might fail, but they always will say, let's try a non-medication approach, which allows us to actually take a prolonged non-medication approach. Oftentimes, families come together, the grandparents are involved. Not to say this is happening in every case, right? But on an average, good insight family in the US, good insight family in India, India can punch above its weight sometimes.
Interesting. So, again, Poonam ma'am and Harish, you have been working with kids in India and parents as well. So, in your experience, what are the challenges that you see how parents respond to their child's mental health, not just in cities, but also in tier two cities? Because I see that this is still people are receptive in terms of understanding what it is, to have the awareness of what it is all about, but not so much in the tier two, tier three cities. Please shed some light over it.
So I'll go first. So I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the school setting that I am in. And after being here for about 25 years, the very positive change, Ashima, that I see is there is more openness. So this year we started on meetings where the counselors, we've expanded the team of the emotional needs counselors, and they are meeting every child, documenting it. And this began in April. But the really positive result of it is we see children sitting outside the emotional needs counselor's room and saying, "We are waiting for ma'am." Vis-a-vis 8 years ago or a couple of years before COVID, they would hide, they would not want to be, they didn't want their friends to know that they're going to the emotional needs counselor. So I think school in a school like ours, which talks a lot about mental health, we've also had alumni, we've had panel discussions of 2 or 3 alumni who've battled mental health, depression issues, and who are now doing well in life, come and talk to teachers first, to train teachers, and also come and do sessions with children alone, just with the emotional needs counselors. So I think that has brought about the awareness. And there is, of course, way more openness in the conversations that students have. And it's
Lovely.
also grade 11 and 12. If I talk especially about grade 11 and 12, I think adolescence, it is not so much in 11 and 12. The adolescence, when I joined school in 11 and 12, adolescence was there. But now 11 and 12, I don't remember having to raise my voice in a really long time because they are settled, pretty much settled. They don't want to test boundaries except if it's maybe a new teacher coming in. So it's easier to handle them now. There is more openness. And when the juniors see their seniors in that light, they also somewhere follow the steps.
So,
So,
I can't stop myself from sharing. I've worked in 2 different schools where one, I was managing a cohort, which was a large cohort, let's put it that way. And students were called out from the floor to meet a social emotional well-being educator. And they used to feel so embarrassed, going to them. They were not comfortable at all being called out, and everybody else asking, "What happened? Why were you called outside?" All of those from the present school that I'm in. And over here, I'd say I'm proud to say that Legacy is one of those schools where social emotional learning, well-being, with inclusive education and career counseling goes hand in hand as early as grade 6 and 7th, even Montessori
yeah.
for that matter. So it is so important to have regular uh, interactions with students. And, I would like to share that I actually have a careers period with students, and our social emotional learner educators also have a period every week. Once a week, we all meet our students one-on-one, speak to them, build that relationship, that comfort that they can come to us and say, "Ma'am, we are here to see you, to meet you," have that bond, the same bond that teachers have with them in the class. So that is wonderful to see. Amazing.
Yeah, in
Harish.
fact, we also pretty much have those, timetable classes with 11s and 12s more frequent than grades 9 and 10. So do the emotional needs counselors, and of course, an inclusive setup right from nursery schools. So it's
Lovely.
great. Yeah,
Kudos to such schools. Thank you.
good.
Harish.
Yeah.
Well, Poonam ma'am, it's good to know that students in grade 11 and 12, you don't need to talk to them in a raised volume. My daughter is in grade 9, so I guess I only have 1 or 2 more years to talk in a raised
Yeah.
volume to her. No, this is a very interesting topic for me, Ashima. I'll stick to the theme of stigma and taboo, just continuing from my response before. So we know that there is stigma and taboo, and there's still a lot more work to be done in that space. And as a task force within the IC3, we are embarking on several initiatives, and these initiatives fall within primarily 3 buckets of work. One is data and research, one is advocacy in action, and the other is education and training. And within advocacy in action, what we are trying to do is work directly with the students. So in another hat that I wear, I work with some experiential learning programs, and I've begun to, I mean, it didn't, this realization was not very recent. through my experience at the College Board with AP, I really began to realize the power of youth, bringing youth to the table, providing them with the tools, the agency, and the platform for them to really solve today's world's pressing problems, mental health being one of them. And so one of our advocacy and action initiatives is working with schools, but asking them to have their students express in whatever way they want. And we have started with the Nukkad Natak art expression, where we provide certain instructions, certain guardrails, not to constrain them a lot, but just certain themes that we'd love them to explore. But then we give them full freedom and agency to come up with their own script, their own play. We piloted that with a few schools, although these schools are in the tier 1 cities. But my hope is now to take it to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities and have students over there put up such plays and raise such social issues with their parents, with their educators, and certainly with the public, if the schools can host these plays out in the public space. We had the Pathway School demonstrate one such play at the IC3 annual conference, and several other schools have also participated in this pilot. And my hope is to have schools from the length and breadth of the country really having the students express around mental health themes and use them to galvanize the whole nation to normalize the conversation around mental health. I am less skeptical, sorry, Dr. Rastogi or Poonam ma'am, but I'm less skeptical about us adults trying to break this problem of stigma. I think the students themselves have the tools. Whichever side of the fence you are on social media, I think that can be a really powerful tool that today's youth can use to normalize this conversation around mental health. You're on mute, Ashima.
Sorry. Just not normalizing the mental health, but how it really plays with the students' careers and aspirations that they have with themselves. Poonam, I'm considering we both work with students as career counselors. This What's the significant impact of parental expectations on career choices in India? And we know that it is, highly influenced by what the parents' decisions are. How do you address situations where students' mental health is compromised by the pressure to fulfill those expectations built by whether it's parents, it's family, it's societal pressures, sometimes even peers for that matter? My friends are applying to 10 different countries. I also want to apply. My friends are giving IIT JEE and I also want to do that. So yeah, how do you do that?
I think we talk of peer pressure for children. Very often there is peer pressure for parents. It's pretty interesting when I have a grade 5 parent sitting across my table and asking me and telling me, ma'am, but my child wants to do the international curriculum and I think he's a really great fit. And the conversation with parents today, pardon me, I'm a much older parent, so I'm sure there are multiple generational gaps, but I feel there is a lot of counseling that needs to be done to parents when they come and say, the child wants to do this. And then I sit across the table, an old woman, and I tell them very clinically, the decision is first how deep the money in the pocket is. International education is a very different economic ball game. It's a very different social ball game, because when you go into that bracket, you should have the money and you should be able to live in a certain standard, which is very different, because those are the people who have the capacity to pay. So I think parents need to be told that it's okay. A lot of them also think international curriculum is the way to the Ivy Leagues. So, when we have these subject choice orientations, to be telling them, putting the data out there that these are your national curriculum placements, these are your international curriculum placements, and no one is a lesser mortal by not spending that money. So one is counseling the parent. Two, calling parents back to speak to parents. Parents speak to parents, meet with parents. That is another really effective step up, very, very effective. You know, when you have an alumni speaking to students or you have a parent speaking to parents, it makes a way greater impact than a teacher or a counselor or the principal of the school has with the parent. So in fact, I know of someone who's actually just doing counseling for parents, what to do from grade 8 upwards, what to do from grade 5 upwards. So that's pretty interesting. And I think very often when they are sitting across the table and if the child is there, asking the child to step out and then giving the parent a little bit of a reality check, especially when they are sitting across and telling you, ye nahi kar raha, he's not studying. I think he should do NEET and he should do JEE together, and the poor kid is looking very lost. So asking the kid to move out, because at the end of the day, the kid has to be respectful of the parent, right? I can't replace the parent. I feel sometimes once you feel as an educator, you have that connect with the parent, calling it out to the parent in black and white terms also really helps. And again, putting parents one-on-one in touch helps. And suppose they come and say interested in bio, so medicine, then if you have some data, there are some common pain points that we know for all children and parents. So if we have some data ready and we can tell them that, okay, no, let's not look at NEET, but these are the career options, that is also very, very helpful.
True, true. Poonam ma'am, I'll share something with you, and I don't want to be too controversial about it, but a lot of times parents are in a delusion that my child is excellent, and as Dr. Pramit said that, oh, he's a perfectionist and he's doing everything well, that's also not correct, right? So a student who is high aspirational, but that aspiration has come from parental side and not his own because he does not know what he wants to do and is completely blank. And then we identify that, yes, he's dealing with stress, which we don't know if it's a mental health issue, but as Harish said, it's all about mental fitness. How do you really bring that conversation up with parents? Because I struggle doing that a lot of times. And this is something which cannot be kept confidential. A lot of times students come to us and just to confide in us, they would say, this is what is happening, but don't speak to anyone. And this is how I feel. Now, getting concerned, and then we have to be open about it because in school setups, nothing is confidential, if I may put it that way, because we are not practitioners in general outside, we're not therapists. So it is not confidential. How do you do these difficult conversations with parents, and what really works best for you?
Yeah. So again, since when I was a teacher, it was very different because I had that connect. When I'm a counselor, it's very different. First thing for me, if the child has told me something in confidence, before I bring it up to whoever the person higher up with, whether it's the academic coordinator or principal, telling the child, convincing the child that this needs to be told to somebody. It will take some time because I know if I've gone and heard him out and then gone and told somebody, and that somebody is not cognizant, and by mistake it lets it out of his mouth that this has happened, and it circles back to the child, and that child has lost that trust. The career counselor's room is a very non-judgmental area for the child. They feel we don't know what they do in the classroom, so they feel they can share a lot. But having the buy-in, even if that buy-in takes me some time, that is one approach. And on the other hand, I know that I cannot buy in time. Then I also have to be very selective about the person I'm bringing this up to. And, reiterate to the person, maybe the academic coordinator or the vice principal, that you have to chat with the child and the child will come out. Instead of saying, oh, Poonam said this, what is wrong? Get that conversation going with the child, and the child will 99% of the time come out with the problem. If you can strike the right emotional chord in that conversation, the tears will roll down, the truth will come out.
So true.
Yeah,
so
but
true.
not breaking the trust is very, very critical. Yeah, because he or she is not going to come back otherwise.
It's something I got to learn, and I'm sure this is something that my peer counselors who are attending the session got to know. A learning, I would say, never break the trust, no matter how much time it takes for us to convince them that this is what the right way of going forward is. Amazing. Harish, you raised the hand.
Yeah, so if I may address that question as a parent. So recently I did a talk at a school here in Dubai, and I was approaching the problem of anxiety, depression amongst adolescents, uh, blaming it on social media and access to phones. Now, I was looking at it as a collective action problem. The moment you give the phone and a smartphone that to your child, then there is no way of taking it back later on. And the problem with it is it's the students actually don't want these smartphones. Surprisingly, my daughter doesn't want a smartphone because she thinks that it's going to distract her from some of the important things. I don't know how she thinks like that, but bless her. The problem, though, is she also tells us that she's missing out on some of the stuff that her friends are doing. And so all her peers in her class, first of all, including Ananya, we've given her an iPhone. They all have access to smartphones. The problem, though, is they also open accounts in these sort of visual social media platforms, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. And I find this far worse and kind of compounding the problem in today's generation. Um, but how do you get these students out of these social media platforms? It's very difficult. And so what I did was I started colluding with other parents, and we agreed that if some of us don't take the phone away, but stop the student from using Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, then the other students will follow and they won't feel like they're missing out on anything. And that is something I'm still testing. And I over weekends, we tell Ananya to go out with her girlfriends, and we tell them do anything. Just go to the mall. We drop them at a mall. Go buy ice cream or go place, do something, but without your phones. Because I know that the moment you give them the phones, they are going back to their Instagram and taking selfies and posting it out there. Um, so parents can play an important role over here, but they would have to do it collectively. It's very difficult for a single parent to kind of approach this problem of smartphone / social media.
True, and of course, I can say about it why, because we are an Apple integrated school and every child has a iPad with them, and God knows our EdTech team works day in and day out where they have to block so many sites completely. They have to keep track of every single thing.
Yeah.
Imagine. So yeah,
After
that's
2 years of sending Ananya to a school, I realized that they still had access to WhatsApp through their browser. So my wife and we have a family chat group. My wife and I were chatting, and suddenly Ananya, she did it by mistake, I think. She suddenly sends a text, and I'm like, wait. I know your school does not allow you to use phones. They're supposed to keep their phones in their lockers or in their bags for the full 8 or 9 hours. But lo and behold, she sends a text. And now I know that students in their school can WhatsApp with each other through the web browser.
right, right. Um, I think Shivani wants to ask a question if panelists are okay.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
don't want to ask question. I just want to share my experience with Harish. That when he talks about the peer pressure, it's about parents also. When parents are using too much of phones and gadgets, and if they tell their child that you don't use it, that is not the correct model, I feel. Because if you talk about the quality time they have to spend with the family also and peer. Because if at home there's no family time, what the child will learn that he is very easy, to be with his phone, and he can spend the time on phone because the parents don't have time for child to spend. So what I have seen in my counseling sessions, that two ambitious parents, working parents, don't give time, quality time to their child, and they end up, using mobile phone more.
Right, right. Thank you so much for that observation. That's very true, and we see that quite often. Yes, Dr. Pramit.
I'm just very impatient to share 2 or 3 points because so many nice points have been raised. Thank you, Poonam ma'am. Hearing that from you as a Sriram parent is very reassuring. Whatever you said about, what needs to be done with parents as they figure out career choices. Point number one, um, in mental health, there is this constant battle between underdiagnosis and overdiagnosis. So I've had kids who are now so nifty that they are gaming the system to get a diagnosis, right? Saying all the right things, getting a cognitive assessment, like very nifty, right? And at the same time, there are kids who are masking and trying to cover up their difficulties. So this is something that's very hard as a professional to wrap our minds about, because it's two very different things, right? So that is one. The other is, to the point of mental fitness, is that how much understanding is too much understanding. It's a related point, right? That as we are saying, all right, we have to be supportive. Like there's a lot of data that accommodations and that we give to kids in colleges sometimes are not that effective. So if you have somebody with ADHD and they have extended deadlines, they are not going to register the first deadline, and they're going to exceed the extended deadline by 2 days. And in college, then they'll get flack. So the colleges are setting it up by understanding too quickly, too early. So now when I write accommodation letters for college, I say, all right, if you have more than 2 assignments, right? So if you have 3 assignments due a certain day, then one will be submitted 2 days before, one will be submitted day off, and one 2 days after. So how much understanding is too much understanding is something that applies for certain schools, certain parents. It doesn't apply to maybe tier 2, tier 3 cities. There, let's just increase understanding, right? And the third point is screen time. So it's very clear in my clinic, if there is a ninth grader and above who's struggling with screen time and they have an Apple device, right? I have them set up the screen timer password for their father or mother's phone, and the father and mother will set up the screen timer for the ninth grader. And you can see the glee, right? The glee is both sadistic as well as protective, meaning now I'll see you suffer, but also protective, because they say, no, no, dad is fine, but mom really needs help. And the moment you give them the access that, okay, mom's screen time password is with you, right? They say, all right, do whatever you want with my phone. What I'm trying to say is that you will have to not only model, but also understand and accept that just because you're an adult, you cannot control your screen time, right? It's like a pack of cigarettes kept on the dining table. Once you're on it, you're on it. So we are all equally vulnerable to screen time addiction. And the only solution is to have social media apps put under a stream time with a password, and you cannot have the password. So ninth and onwards, screen time passwords are key. The screen time can be negotiable. I never tell my kids how much screen time they're allowed. They can take 4 hours, 5 hours, but at least I know it can never be 12 hours if they decide to keep their room locked on a weekend. So yeah, those were the few thoughts I had.
Right. Very interestingly on this point itself, do you think, Dr. Pramit, that modern schools, and we talk about tier 1 schools, are they becoming overly focused on collaboration and accommodations, like giving accommodations for everything? And probably, are we truly preparing our students for the real world by offering them too many accommodations and adjustments at the school level?
I think the pendulum is swinging in that direction. I think it's very tricky because some kids are not getting the right amount, some kids are getting the right amounts, and some kids are getting too much,
Too
right?
much.
So it is just a professional challenge to keep optimizing it all the time. But yes, I do feel that while it is very welcome change that we are recognizing all kinds of neurodiversity, we have to also know how to turn the screws also. And I'll give you one corporate example, right? So in a certain company, we saw somebody who was referred to us as an adult. Now they had a diagnosis of ADHD. The boss said, oh my God, I need to support them, said, you have flexible work hours. And we all know that individuals with ADHD actually need more structure. So do anxious kids, but they need more structure. So eventually, 3 months after working with them, I actually had that employee email the boss and said, I want to be held accountable to my rigid work hours because that is what makes me accountable. So we have to really understand the mechanics of ADHD, for example, and give the right kind of accommodation. And I think in this, as Poonam ma'am said, the more intuitive approach is the right approach. You don't have to be an expert, right? We all know how people used to study in the 90s and the 2000s, right? One other big problem is our kids have rooms which have doors, right? I sometimes say गुड़गांव की प्रॉब्लम है कि बस दरवाजा तोड़ दो सारा प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो जाएगा मेरी क्लिनिक बंद हो जाएगी, right? Because once you close the door, right, and you put the stake of I'm independent, I need my time. I mean, I think I got into medical school only because I didn't have a room. I had to study on the dining table, right? What will I do? And I didn't have a phone.
On the same note, you're talking about ADHD, dyslexia, and all. What are some of the common misconceptions about youth mental health? Because everybody's talking about this and that, but then, um, what what are the in as in what are the broader misconceptions related to mental health that we often overlook?
Does anybody else want to take this first?
You go, Pramit, Dr. Pramit.
So the biggest misconception, according to me, and this is politically incorrect maybe, is that I don't think there is as much depression under the age of 15 as we think it is. Okay, it is below 15, below 16. Depression is more a depressive state brought on by over average anxieties, some kind of undiagnosed learning disability, mild ADHD in an otherwise perfectionistic kid can really precipitate a depressive state after a point in time. So depression is overdiagnosed, I think, sometimes because then you're describing the symptom, right? That's presenting symptom, but what is at the bottom of it? That is one misconception. The second misconception, especially in adults, maybe that is an adult psychiatry issue, is that a lot of times when our kids go to college, right, and they don't have an ADHD diagnosis or an anxiety, especially ADHD diagnosis, um, uh, they think that you can't have ADHD. And the third misconception is that, giftedness is not going to present that openly. So giftedness, OCD, these are things that are hidden in plain sight. Till you ask questions, like even if you say, are you very particular about things? No, nothing like that. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, but nothing else. Like there's a lot of OCD in plain sight. There are plenty of Dravids hanging out there, right? If you don't ask, you don't know. If you don't ask about giftedness, you will not find out about it. So my ask of kind of the mental health providers and teachers is to be curious and be curious about all these subheadings: OCD, giftedness, ADHD. The most common presentation I have is people who don't have full-fledged ADHD, but people who are generally perfectionistic, who have a touch of ADHD, and as the executive demands increase, they are unable to cope up with it, start having panic attacks. And the reason it's important is that if they come in frank panic attack situation, there's an expectation to give medications, right? Or there's a need for medications. And if you give anxiety medications to an overall anxious kid who has benefited from that anxiety, it was good anxiety, right? Then it actually makes them more dysregulated because they chill out too much. So it's a little complicated. I'm just throwing it out there that it is not that this is what I'm actually reversing what other psychiatrists or people are doing who are more adult trained, and that's the child and adolescent lens of subclinical symptoms tipping you over, rather than anxiety in itself tipping you over.
It's very interesting. We started off with unseen challenges, unseen signs. But there's another thing. A lot of times students come and they say, "Oh, I'm depressed and I can't take my exam." How do you even know whether that kid is actually depressed or not? And it completely puts schools in a fix as to what to say, whether the kid is really depressed, anxious. What is it all about?
Doesn't matter, but I would say that the kid is coming and wanting an excuse. I think that's important, right? So it's almost like coming out. Like, why would I come out as gay or lesbian, right? If there was nothing going on. I mean, when people say why are they doing it? All right, some parents say, is this for attention? Maybe so. But if this is how they're wanting to get attention rather than come first in a relay, right? Then I need to be curious of why are they making it up. So the fact that they've come to us saying, I think I have depression, I said, all right, let's talk about whatever it is. You might not have other words for it. You might not know what dyslexia is. You might not know what executive functioning difficulties are. You might not know what time management is. You are reporting end symptom, and it's my job to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. Poonam ma'am?
I think sometimes a little lesser technical knowledge helps. I'm going to share my own experience where I was heading the section of children with disability from a completely non-psychological background. And the way I dealt, they were the senior school students, and I was very away from all that they were taught in middle school in terms of schedule, structure, bell, putting up something on the desk. I think it works where Dr. Pramit said tier 1 schools, too much. I think just looking at something from a non-technical standpoint and following your intuition, following what your heart is saying, not so much what the head is saying, sometimes just helps. When you challenge them in the right way, I think it brings the best out of the child rather than mollycoddling them all the time. But it has to be done with very, very sensitively, striking the right balance. A child comes into the home science lab, a child with disability, and they have to tie the apron. They have difficulties. In grade 9, when they came to us, there would be an uproar initially. Ma'am is so strict, she doesn't help them with tying the apron, but ma'am would not tie the apron. Of course, we knew that one kid who could not do it, but over the next 3 months, they learned that skill. So sometimes just gently pushing them helps.
Right. Harish?
Yeah, no, I'll just piggyback on what Poonam ma'am mentioned around mollycoddling their children, and I think this can be a role that parents play. I don't know, over the times we have started overprotecting our children in the physical world, and ironically underparenting them in the digital world. But we've already talked about the digital world, but let's talk about the physical world. And here sorry, I use analogies a lot, so bear with me. But I'm a huge fan of Nassim Taleb, who has written this book on anti-fragility. And I think we need to look at our children as anti-fragile. So what's anti-fragile in this context? What's something that's fragile? If you give a glass to a child, they'll play with it, they'll drop it, it breaks, it's fragile. What did we do? We replaced the glass with a sippy cup. Now when the child drops the sippy cup, nothing happens. The sippy cup doesn't break, but there's no impact. But if you look at biological systems, interestingly, they tend to be anti-fragile, which is for your immune system to develop, you have to expose your children to dirt, to have them play around with in the ground and fall sick. Then that's the only way your immune system tunes up. Similarly, there was this experiment done in the 90s called the biosphere, where a bunch of humans were put in this closed environment, and they were made to breathe the same oxygen, use the same water, because they were, preparing for a future life in Mars. But what they found out was the plants that they planted in this closed environment, it grew into trees, but for some reason the trees then fell off. And when the designers went back and looked at the system, they found out that they didn't introduce wind. And the function of wind did was it made these trees anti-fragile. So when the wind blows on the tree sways. And then there's a feedback loop system that tells the root, oops, the tree has swayed, I need to now grow further in this other direction so that I can give it more support. I think we have to treat children like that. Just like how baby kittens and baby puppies, they don't play near their mommy. They very quickly move away from their mom, and then they start climbing buildings and trees and kind of pushing their boundaries. We have to give our children that opportunity. We have to give our children the opportunity to fail, to get into this free played opportunities where they learn conflicts, disputes, and they learn how to adjudicate amongst themselves. I think that's where true learning happens. And that's where I think we can cut down on a lot of anxiety as a result.
True that. Interestingly, let's also touch the base as to what are the main gaps and opportunities in mental health care from a school standpoint. Poonam ma'am, would you like to address some of those?
Hima, there is someone who's raised a query, wants to ask a question. Do we want to? She's just messaged saying, can we leave time for quick Q&A?
Sure. Go for it. Oh, we didn't even realize it's 8:05.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. Hi. Hi. No, go ahead. I mean, I think these topics, Ashima, whichever points you're bringing out are really interesting. And I'm really just making some notes. And so kind of planning also what specifically I will ask in the end. So if you're extending, I'm okay with it. I don't
Awesome,
know about
awesome.
others. Yeah.
Absolutely. Our panelists, are we okay in extending a few more minutes? Okay, perfect. Yes,
Sorry,
Poonam
you'll
ma'am.
have to repeat the question, Ashima.
Absolutely. So the question goes, from a school point of view, what are some of the gaps and opportunities in mental health care, that a lot of schools are not able to do, schools like yours and mine, yes, but what are the others?
Yeah, good question. And I don't know, I think some part of my answer may just sound theoretical, but if we could implement it, I think one thing which is not so difficult to implement is putting boxes where children can put down. They may not all schools will be privileged to have a career counseling cell and an emotional needs counseling cell and a sense center. So if there are boxes for parents, boxes for students to voice their concerns, and if the management slowly gets familiar and aware, they will definitely move towards making that possible for their students. The other thing is, that is the very theoretical thought that I had, was if a school could mentor another school. Children from our schools like ours, Ashima, we have a lot of children who are doing work in the mental health space, whether it's in the form of Nukkad Natak or they are going and doing something related to happiness or mental well-being. So if one school could adopt another school, it could be a part of their, in the Indian curriculum, the SUPW, or it could be a part of the CAS project for the IB schools. That could be another way of supporting schools. And after being in the system for so long, I feel if a school picks up another school, then that relationship just goes a long way. Like, I know our schools have been working with some schools for the last 12 years, 15 years. So if each school could pick up one or two, that would be a very good thing. And also, if teachers could mentor teachers in other schools, that would also help. Yeah, both of them are a little theoretical because there's no law, there's no system, but awareness from schools like ours would definitely help.
Absolutely, would go a long way. Dr. Pramit, what are your thoughts over it?
I think I don't know which schools, because different schools are at different levels, but many times the counseling department becomes a disciplinary arm of the administration, right? So this kid is having difficulty and all that. So again, as Poonam ma'am also said earlier, if there is a symptom, if there is a problem, then we have to understand where is it coming from, rather than focus on ye bacha badmash hai, iske parents ko bulao, right? um, uh, and second, I can't stress this enough, that schools have to be really interested in empowering the counseling department to the point that they should almost report to an external supervising psychologist, so that the hierarchy is sure. From a safety standpoint, they should still report to administration, right? But they have to really be the last word on it, and on mental health. And for that, there has to be constant skilling up to the level of a clinical psychologist in the community, no less, right? My experience is that I see school counselors being very hardworking, being very spread thin, but not, and having a lot of responsibility, but not having a lot of power, not having a lot of autonomy, right? That we cannot be, that link cannot be that weak, right? Because who else knows, right? And sure, if you think that they don't, then why isn't there a program? Like, one of my aspirations is to kind of have a school counseling upskilling thing. Like, what are we seeing in the clinic? What is topical, right? What do I want them to know? Because that helps me. When somebody's referred to me, they're already done some of the legwork, right? From a public health background, we are never going to be enough child psychiatrists and child psychologists to cover everybody. So the school counselors have to be skilled up to do some of our work, so that some of the work doesn't come to us. We don't want to work that much.
And I think even when they are skilled, they are basically not equipped with the authority to probably work on it from a school standpoint, you know. So that's one of the challenges from a school setup. Harish, you leading the task force, how do you see, managing these gaps and opportunities, creating opportunities for mental health care in schools?
Yeah, so this neatly fits within our third area of work, which is education and training. And Dr. Rastogi rightfully said that we don't have enough psychologists or psychiatrists to support the population of India. And so I think the nation has to adopt a community-driven mental care health model. I think the numbers are, there's only 0.75 mental health experts in India to support 100,000 population, whereas the ideal number I think is 3, and some of the high income countries, typically in the West, they are at 6. So we are educating a lot of our students to take up psychology, but it'll take time and we can't wait until then. And so skilling our counselors, skilling our teachers, and we can do this in many ways. I think the first step to do it is get many of them gatekeeper trained. And there are many institutions in India that provides these services. In fact, within TOC, we heard from one organization, Empower, that provides the services. But there are several other organizations, the QPR Institute, Suicide Prevention India Foundation, Unkahi Helpline, or the Connect Hurt. All of them are backed by philanthropic rupees, and they go out to schools and can provide, if not free, but at least a low cost gatekeeper training to counselors and teachers. I think just like how we all now have a sense of CPR basics, I would look at gatekeeper training to be kind of that CPR equivalent for mental health.
I completely agree with you, and second on this thought, because I know this year it's an initiative in our school where the school counselors, which is the social emotional learning counselors, have actually rolled out a Google form, which is an anonymous form, that the gatekeepers, who are the teachers, can actually fill that form in case they feel that there is some help that is needed for a particular child. So, and very smoothly done. They're not called out. They're not, they're not labeled or anything. They're just simply, it's just an alert which says that, okay, fine, I need to, like a social emotional educator, I need to go and have a conversation, a one-on-one conversation, or if not one-on-one conversation, I'll probably just have a lookout in my class, in my period, on this particular child. So it's a very interesting thing to say that, yes, a lot of schools do need to have gatekeepers, but keeping in mind that, schools don't have access to mental health professionals as such. And most of the times, like you shared, teachers really label it as, there is a problem or they're just making stuff up. We are overboard the time. Closing thoughts, in your
I'll just
opinion?
add one quick thing that Dr.
Yes.
Rastogi mentioned, which is around empowering counselors. But last year, the Ministry of Education did, so there are certain things I think the government does an excellent job, but there are some things that I don't think they are equipped to do. And one thing that I felt that they've done a good job is they've rolled out a policy, or at least guidelines, that schools can try and adopt to empower certain staff members of the school. I think the guidelines is called UMEED. It's an acronym for several words. I think you can find it readily available on the internet. Whether there are certain schools that have the resources to implement it, not sure about that. But it's very clear guidelines of sort of like a SWAT team where the principal or the headmaster, headmistress is at the top, and there are certain staff members looking after the mental health care needs of the school, and then kind of having an external validator, to Dr. Rastogi's point, being part of this team as well. So just check out Umeed. It's a very interesting set of guidelines that the Ministry of Education has put out there. I just don't know whether it's being implemented, and in fact, whether even schools are aware of this, that these guidelines do exist.
Right, right. Interestingly, I am definitely going to go ahead and check this out, Umid, for sure. On that note, before we take up other people's questions, participant questions, in your opinion, just say one thing, what is the most important step that we can take today to better support the mental health well-being of our young students or youth per se? Just one.
I'll just repeat what I said, ended with gatekeeper training. Just get yourself gatekeeper trained.
Amazing.
Mental health
Poonam,
of teachers as well.
absolutely. Very important. Very important.
Talks about that. Like you said in the beginning, no one takes them off because you're not feeling mentally there.
That's so true.
Balance between understanding and too much understanding, because I think that's what we are looking at the next 10 years. Make or break it, I think.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. Very, very insightful and engaging. I mean, I'm a novice, but I learned quite a lot over here, for sure. We can take certain questions. Anybody who wants to ask a question can raise hands. Yes, Deepika, go ahead.
Hi. Oh God, really, it was very, very important, very interesting. And the panel combination was awesome. Each one of you have really brought in something. As far as I'm concerned, I have experience of teaching in an alternative school in Bangalore, Purna Learning Center. And before that, I have been in engineering corporate world for 18 years. Now I'm a counselor, a psychological counselor. I have also taken training in IC3 Empower. So I mean, I'm really aware of all this. I'm right now a practicing psychological counselor, a parent who have gone through all this. I had my own mental health journey. I opened up to say, no, I need to do something because life is one. There's nothing less, nothing more. If I feel to do it, I have to do it. But now I have come to a empathetic ground level condition of the prevailing situation, why things are the way they are. When we say curiosity, like, as Poonam ma'am brought in, curiosity, and then as Dr. Pramit brought in, like, just increasing understanding, which is happening in tier 2, T3. Curiosity, just to understand, and also to have that humility that how much ever I know, I'm still a drop in the ocean. I might be like 10 times the diameter of one other next one, or maybe 1,000 times the diameter of that next one, but still a drop in the ocean. So can I have that, like as Ganesh Kohli sir says, I keep chopping my ego when I sit on my chair. So like, I was just wondering, curiosity has a huge power in itself. The moment I started bending, the more I started learning and understanding. Can I not blame actually? Neither myself, not anybody else. So my question is, okay, I was talking too much now. Back to the question. It is that I have learned that when I got counseling, when I approached, I opened up. That was a time when, अब क्या खराब हो सकता है यार, अब तो करना ही है. It's like, you come to a stage कि यार, अब ठीक है, अब होगा तो देखा जाएगा. Why to wait till that level? Can adults be also counseled? It's a chicken egg problem between adults. Adults were also children sometime. There's no certification given to a parent. There's no manual come to a parent that यार ये child ऐसा है, machine के साथ, you get a manual, but you don't get a manual to become a parent. But you have all the rights to become a parent. Every adult becomes a parent. Nobody will say, yaar, tu parent nahi ban sakta. So the point is counseling for all the adults. And it becomes very important for teachers themselves. There is a rule to be having a counselor in every school. Like as Poonam said, I really like that term when you say emotional health. Emotional, what you had written?
Mental fitness.
No. I was really, one is academic counselor, other is emotional health counselor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, do teachers have access to emotional health counselor?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Deepika, just to sum it up over here, and these are the sessions that, this kind of awareness, doing these sessions and talking about it more openly gives the opportunity to not just us who are working firsthand with our students, but also other people who may not be able to join, but will be able to listen to these conversations later on will learn from these. And all I can say is we need to start talking about these things more openly, without feeling the pressure of, hiding them under the blanket. And on that note, thank you so much, everyone. I think there are a lot of other questions that probably our audience would like to share with you. Dr. Pramit, would you like to share your contact details if you're okay with that? As you said, they can write to you directly. Poonam ma'am, Harish, more so about the task force that you're working on. I think it'll be really wonderful if you could type in, your contact details so our audience can get in touch with you. Amazing. We are 20 minutes over our time.
From an education and psychology standpoint, I completely concur with you.
Thank you so much for this session. Amazing.
Great.
And I
Thank
have
you.
questions, Ashima, I have questions and have points to share, but maybe as you said, we could do it. It's really way across the boundary. We could do it in the contact we can get to
Oh,
Dr. Amit,
absolutely.
Harish I have, and Poonam ma'ams. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Ashima,
Absolutely.
yours also. Yeah. Okay,
I'm
sure.
not an expert, but I'll
No,
still
no.
share it with you for sure.
You raised good questions. That was great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. This is a topic very close to my heart. Thank you so much, all the panelists, for a wonderful, wonderful, insightful session. Thank you, Bhakti and Ankur, for giving us the platform. And thank you, our audience. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sagar. All right. Bye.
Namaste and bye.
Sagar, are you still there?